Ja Rule went from being one of the best-selling rappers in the early 2000s to a joke and internet meme after his brutal beef with 50 Cent. Bad
Comment down below if you grew up listening to Ja Rule.
business decisions, legal problems, and fraud all helped ruin his legacy. This is the true story of the rise and embarrassing fall of Ja Rule. Jeffrey Bruce Atkins, aka Ja Rule, was born on February 29, 1976 in New York City. He grew up in Hollis, Queens, the same neighborhood that was home to other hip-hop legends like LL Cool J, Russell Simmons, Run DMC, and his future business partner, Irv Gotti. Growing up, Ja had it pretty tough. His father left the family when he was young, so his mom Deborah had to raise Ja on her own. Deborah worked as a nurse at a hospital and often struggled to put food on the table. So, Ja sometimes lived with his grandparents because of how much his mom had to work. When he was only 5 years old, the family went through a tragedy after his younger sister Karen died of respiratory problems. That left Ja as an only child, and from then on, it was just him and his mom. He went on to live with his grandparents full-time when he was about 6 years old and stayed there until he was about 12 or 13. His grandparents were Jehovah's Witnesses, so it was a very strict religious household.
What is Jehovah's Witnesses? 'Cause I heard they're like Christians. Like, it's something like that. Someone please explain that to me.
They didn't celebrate birthdays or Christmas, and he was never allowed to listen to rap music, but all the strict rules made him want to rebel. And the first time he ever heard hip-hop, he knew he was going to be a rapper. But rap wasn't the only way Ja was starting to rebel. After he left his grandparents' house, he started drinking and smoking weed, and that's when he hopped off the porch and started hustling and selling drugs in the street. With his mom always working,
It's just a terrible way to go, man. There's other ways of doing it, man. Just get a 9 to 5, man. There's other ways of doing it. It's not gonna get you in trouble, man. Just saying.
and no father or older brothers around to show him a better path, Ja looked up to the local rappers and drug dealers who wore nice clothes and drove expensive cars. But being in the streets exposed him to a lot, especially because it was the height of the crack era. In an interview with Vlad TV, he said that even his friends, parents, and siblings were hooked on drugs, and he was the one selling it to them. Even though he was selling drugs at an early age, Ja still had bigger dreams of making it as a rapper, but he knew that school wasn't going to get him to where he wanted to be in life, so he dropped out in the 11th grade. He later said, "I just couldn't take it. I was into my own little world, doing what I thought was smart at the time." But after dropping out, he started to realize he wasn't exactly moving weight as a drug dealer. He decided that hustling full-time probably wouldn't work out long-term, and to add even more pressure, his girlfriend Aisha got pregnant. But he never had a regular job and had no high school diploma, so he had to figure out how he was going to feed his new family. He'd already started rapping as a hobby when he was in high school, freestyling in the lunchroom and on street corners. So he decided that his only option was to make a name for himself in the music industry. Around that time, he linked up with Chris Black in 01 and started a group called the Cash Money Clique. They also recruited a local producer named DJ Irv, later known as Irv Gotti, who started making beats for him. That's when Jeffrey Atkins officially took the stage name Ja Rule, which was a nickname he got from a friend in the neighborhood. With Irv's help, Cash Money Clique released their first single, Get the Fortune, in 1994. That single built a local buzz in New York, which helped them ink a deal with TVT Records. Another Queens rapper named Mick Geronimo was already signed to the label and was also a friend of Irv, so they both helped put the deal together. Even though Ja Rule became famous for his radio hits, Cash Money Clique had a sound inspired by 90s boom bap and G-Funk. After signing to TVT, they released another single called For My Clique, which featured Mick Geronimo on the hook. The track was an underground hit on pirate radio and even got played on Yo MTV Raps. Cash Money Clique was popping off, and Ja thought he was really about to break into the industry, but out of nowhere, it all fell apart. Cash Money Clique was busy working on an album, but due to music industry politics, it got shelved. Without any income from rap, Chris Black went back to hustling and ended up catching a case that landed him 5 years in prison. That convinced TVT that the group was not going to happen, so they got dropped from the label. That left Ja with no money coming in and a new family to support, so he had to figure something out fast. But even though his first group didn't work out, he still made plenty of contacts in the music industry. He was still tight with Irv Gotti, who had started working as an executive at Def Jam Records. Irv knew Ja had potential, so he helped him secure a deal at Def Jam in 1995. That's when Ja's career really started heating up, and he was working with some of the hottest up-and-coming rappers in New York who would go on to be future legends. His first single on Def Jam was Mick Geronimo's Time to Build, which also featured a young Jay-Z and DMX. He also spit a verse on the track Usual Suspects alongside DMX, The Lox, and Tragedy Gaddafi. So those collabs helped put Ja in the same conversations as some top rappers in New York at the time. Irv also worked closely with Jay-Z and DMX and was important in helping their careers at Def Jam. That's when Russell Simmons decided to give Irv his own imprint and let him start his label, Murder Inc. When Murder Inc. first launched in 1998, Irv knew exactly who he wanted as his first signee, and he chose Ja Rule to be the label's main artist. During his time with Murder Inc., Ja continued to work with some of the biggest artists in the 90s, including Nas, Method Man and Redman, DMX, and LL Cool J. He even did a hook for Jay-Z's hit single, Can I Get Her? And after just a couple years in the industry, Ja was becoming one of the most hyped up and upcoming artists of the time. He really started to blow up with the release of his first single, Holla Holla, which became an instant hit, peaking at number 35 on Billboard. A few months later, he followed up with his debut album, Fendi Vedi Vici, which sold 184,000 copies in the first week and peaked at number 3 on Billboard. So Ja was quickly proving that he was not just a one-hit wonder, but had the potential to be a superstar. His career continued to take off after he worked with Christina Milian for his second single, Between Me and You. It was his first crossover hit and got major airplay on Top 40 radio, which helped the song reach number 11 on the Billboard charts. Ja kept the momentum up, and his next single, Put It On Me, featuring Vita and Lil Mo, also popped off and hit number 8 on the charts. Ja already had respect from the hardcore rappers, but he was proving he could pop off on the radio and hit the mainstream too. He switched up his style from being a street rapper into a more pop rap direction, and that's when he really hit the spotlight. His second album, Rule 336, was released on October 10, 2000 and sold 276,000 copies in the first week, making it Ja Rule's first #1 album. The project eventually went triple platinum and even scored Ja's first Grammy Award nomination for Best Rap Performance as a duo or group. By that point, Ja Rule was on his way to becoming one of the biggest artists in the world. Every single and album he dropped was doing bigger and bigger numbers, and the success of Rule 336 made him a household name. He also helped put Murder Inc. on the map and made him one of the hottest record labels in the US. Ja kept his momentum up and dropped his third album, Pain Is Love, a year later on October 2, 2001. He debuted at number 1 on the Billboard charts for the second time in a row after selling 361,000 copies in the first week. Plus, 2 of the singles ran up crazy numbers and went number 1. Ja was on a run that was unlike anything that had been seen before in hip-hop. He was not only a respected artist, but also had the ability to make radio hits. Even though Cash Money Click didn't work out, he bounced back and became one of the biggest success stories of the early 2000s, and it seemed like every record he hopped on was going number 1. But there's only so long that you can have that much success before someone comes along and tries to knock you off the throne. And when Ja was at the top of the game, he sparked a wild beef that ended up destroying his career. Today, younger rap fans don't even remember Ja for his accomplishments in the music industry, but more for his legendary beef with 50 Cent. At the time that Ja was blowing up, 50 was an up-and-coming rapper who still had one foot in the streets. It's unclear exactly where the problem started, since both rappers have a different story, but they both grew up in Queens and knew a lot of the same people. A few different events forced them to pick sides, and they ended up beefing over their affiliations. It all started when Ja got his chain stolen at gunpoint in 50's neighborhood, Southside Jamaica, Queens. According to Ja, he was hanging out in 50's hood because he knew people in the area. He spotted a dude that he knew named Troy, who was from the Baisley Park projects. Troy had just gotten out of prison, so he told Ja to come chop it up with him. But when he got into his car, Troy pulled out a gun and accused Ja of sleeping with his girl while he was locked up. Ja denied it, but Troy forced him to give up his chain before letting him go. At the time, Ja was cool with Kenneth Supreme McGriff, a former drug kingpin who ran the Baisley Park projects. Supreme had gotten out of prison a few years before and had linked up with Irv Gotti and Murder Inc. to try and start a legal career in entertainment. He formed a close relationship with Ja and helped give him credibility in the streets. So after he got his chain stolen, Ja says he hit up Supreme, who made a few phone calls and helped him get it back. But 50 was also cool with Troy and claims that Ja spotted them together at a club a few weeks later, and that's when the beef started. 50 also claims that he was the one who put Troy up to the robbery, but Ja claims the story is all cap and says he had nothing to do with it. Either way, it still hurt Ja's street cred and led to rumors that he was being extorted by Supreme. Later that year, 50 dropped a diss track aimed at Ja Rule and Murder Inc. Records called Life on the Line. The single was supposed to be on 50's debut album, Power of the Dollar, which was eventually shelved, but it was a minor street anthem and showed that 50 was hungry and ready for problems with one of the hottest labels in the world. It wouldn't take long for the situation to heat up and go from disses and threats to real violence. First, there's a situation in an Atlanta nightclub where they were both scheduled to perform. Their managers tried to get them to talk it out and make peace. So 50 approached Ja, who was holding a baseball bat. While they were talking it out, Ja gestured with the bat in a way that made 50 nervous, so he swung at him and sparked a massive brawl. During the fight, 50's crew snatched Ja's chain. 50 claims that he negotiated a deal behind the scenes with Ja's people to get the chain back in exchange for a Movado watch that was stolen from Tony Yayo, but Ja called cap again and said there was never a deal. Then in March 2000, the beef popped off again, and 50 ended up getting stabbed at Hit Factory Studios in New York City. 50 was there working on his album when Ja and his people found out where he was and rode up on him. When they showed up, another fight broke out and a Murder Inc. rapper named Black Child ended up stabbing 50. Ja and Black Child were both arrested, but 50 brushed it off and said that it was just a scratch. The beef almost escalated to murder a few months later when 50 was shot 9 times outside his grandmother's house in Jamaica, Queens. Even though Ja wasn't directly involved with the shooting, it's been rumored forever that the hit was called by his friend Supreme after 50 raps about him on a leaked track called Ghetto Quran. The shooting took 50 off the streets for several months while he recovered, and while he was healing, 50 spent his time plotting the perfect way to get back at his enemy by destroying the career of his main artist and breadwinner. After recovering from the shooting, 50 signed a multi-million-dollar deal with Shady Aftermath Records. He then released a mixtape called No Fear, No Mercy, which featured the popular track Wanksta. According to 50, the song is about a former gangster who doesn't progress in life and ends up looking corny, which he claims was inspired by Ja Rule. The song was the breakout hit from the mixtape and peaked at number 13 on Billboard, marking the first time that 50 could compete with Ja when it came to record sales. Murder Inc. would then clap back by questioning 50's street cred. Irv Gotti went on a radio show and revealed that 50 had filed a protection order against him and Ja after the stabbing at the Hit Factory. It was later revealed that the protection order did exist, but it was done for him by the NYPD without 50 requesting it.
Yeah, I would have done it too, bro. Just stabbed him in GTA. I would have done the same thing.
But to many hardcore rap fans, it didn't matter and it still hurt his buzz at the time. So 50 soon clapped back with the track I Smell Pussy from the G-Unit mixtape The Future Is Now. He didn't hold back and called out Ja Rule, Irv Gotti, and Black Child by name on the intro, taking the beef to a new level. By 2003, 50 was on his way to becoming the biggest rapper of all time after he released his debut album, Get Rich or Die Trying, which sold 872,000 copies in the first week. It was one of the biggest albums of the year, and it also put his beef with Ja in the spotlight after he dissed him on tracks like Life's on the Line and Back Down. On Back Down, 50 went at Ja and Murder Inc. by questioning their street cred and made it clear he wasn't gonna drop the beef. He rapped, "The game's all fucked up now. What we gonna do now? How we gonna eat, man? 50 back around. That's Ja little punk ass thinking out loud. Southside till I die, that's just how I get down." But while 50's career was exploding, Ja's position in the rap game was beginning to fall off. A few months before, in November 2002, he released his 4th album, The Last Temptation. Although it did well commercially, it only sold 237,000 and debuted at number 4 on Billboard. That made it less successful than his last album, Pain Is Love, and nothing close to the numbers that 50 was about to sell. 50 came out of nowhere and took over the rap game, and he was airing Ja out any chance he got. Eventually, Ja decided to clap back on record, and that's when he dropped the diss track Loose Change. On the song, he not only dissed 50, but also took shots at Eminem, Dr. Dre, Busta Rhymes, and even M's daughter, Haley. He rapped, "Em, you claim your mother's a crackhead, and Kim is a known slut. So what's Haley gonna be when she grows up?" Sending shots at 50 was one thing, but going after M and Busta Rhymes too was a huge mistake. A week later, 50 responded along with Eminem and Busta Rhymes on the song Hail Mary. On the song, they made fun of Ja's love for Tupac by referencing one of his classic songs. They also went for the kill, blasting Ja for being a fake gangster and a wannabe. 50 raps, "Motherfuckers thinking they can stop 50, they losing it. Little nigga named Ja think he live like me. Talking about he left the hospital, took 9 like me." Going along with the Biggie vs Tupac theme, Ja responded with another diss called Guess Who Shot Ya, where he went at 50 over the Who Shot Ya instrumental. But even though Ja was clapping back, he couldn't compete with 50 and M. Later that year, Ja released his album, Blood in My Eye, which was basically dedicated to dissing 50 Cent and other rappers he had problems with, like DMX and everyone on Shady Records. It was more aggressive and different than the melodic pop rap style that had made him famous. The change in style clearly didn't work for him because critics bashed the album and it only sold 140,000 copies in the first week, making it his lowest selling project to date. That was basically the beginning of the end for Ja Rule, and his career never really recovered. At the same time, 50 Cent would go on to become the biggest artist in hip-hop, while Ja's career would slowly start to die. In 2003, the Murder Inc. Records offices were raided by police due to their connection to Supreme, and they were accused of laundering money for his drug ring. Irv and his brother Chris would get caught up in a long legal battle, and the label was rebranded as just The Inc. after the release of Blood in My Eye. Even though they eventually beat the case, the label was never the same, especially because their main artist was constantly getting dissed by the biggest rappers in the world. Ja released his sixth album, Rule, in 2004, which was more of a return to his old sound. Even though it got more love from critics, the sales numbers were still nothing close to his early success. The next year, the Inc. released a compilation album called Exodus, which fulfilled Ja's contract with the label, so he decided to take a break from music. He would also face several legal problems due to the ongoing investigation of Murder Inc. and his own bad choices. In 2007, he was arrested in NYC after a Lil Wayne concert at the Beacon Theater. Ja was in a luxury sedan that was driving over the speed limit on West End Avenue when he was stopped by police. When they pulled the car over, they discovered a .40 caliber handgun under the seat, and he was hit with weapon possession charges. But it wasn't just the gun case he was fighting. Ja also later admitted to not filing tax returns for over 5 years and owed the government over $1.1 million for income he made between 2004 and 2008. So, Ja pled guilty to the gun charges and tax evasion in 2011 and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. He eventually got out in July 2013, but at that point, his music career was never the same. He even admitted during a 2013 interview with Angie Martinez that he took the L to 50 Cent in their battle, but that would not stop 50 from continuing to troll him. The two rappers would cross paths later that year after they somehow ended up on the same flight. Luckily, there was no issues on board, but Ja tweeted about it, which set off another back and forth with 50 on social media and re-sparked their beef. It wouldn't help that Ja would give 50 pretty much all the ammunition he needed to continue to taunt him after he was involved in one of the biggest scams of the decade, Fyre Festival. After getting out of prison, Ja knew that he wasn't going to be a star in the rap game anymore and needed a new way to make money. At some point, he was introduced to an entrepreneur named Billy McFarland who wanted Ja to be the creative head and spokesman for his new credit card company, Magnesis. Magnesis was supposed to be an exclusive card-based membership club targeted to rich millennials, but it turned out to be a massive scam. That partnership also led to Ja becoming one of the co-founders of Fyre Media, a talent booking agency founded by Billy McFarland. The company's first major project was Fyre Festival, a massive music festival in the Bahamas that was going to feature performances from some of the biggest artists in the world and other one-of-a-kind experiences.
I heard about this. This turned into a big upset, man. A huge upset.
McFarland used Ja Rule's name to help recruit huge influencers like Kendall Jenner, Emily Ratajkowski, and Bella Hadid to promote the event. He also used those big names and connections to secure millions of dollars of funding from investors to put on the show. But it turns out that Billy was nothing more than a con artist and had no idea how to run a music festival. The entire thing was a complete disaster after all the musical acts backed out, and ticket buyers were left stranded on an island in the Bahamas for days with limited food and shelter. Billy McFarland and Ja Rule were both sued for over $100 million in lawsuits over the situation. Billy ended up getting booked for 6 years in federal prison for wire fraud, while Ja dodged all charges and said he got caught up in McFarland's scam. But even though he was cleared on the legal front, it seems like the Fyre Festival was the final nail in the coffin for Ja's reputation. 50 used the situation to troll Ja on social media. Not long after, he would also take the pettiness to a whole new level after he bought 200 front row seats at one of Ja's shows just to leave them empty. His recent trolling has continued the beef more than 2 decades after it started. The two rappers continue to trade shots on social media, exposing a whole new generation to one of the most legendary feuds in hip-hop history. So with all the L's that Ja has taken over the years, many fans have completely forgotten about all of his early success. He had the rap game on lock from '99 to '03 with one of the craziest runs of any rapper in history. Coming up alongside dudes like Jay-Z and DMX, many fans thought that Ja was another legend in the making. But his many beefs and bad business decisions have completely destroyed his reputation and legacy in music. It isn't completely over for Ja Rule, as he still has a large fan base. If he can manage to release another classic album or find success in some other part of the entertainment business, it's possible he could turn things around. But